Hello everyone and welcome to another game from the World Fischer Random Championship. It's it's day 3, so the 4 classical games are over. Wesley is leading with a 9-point lead as he won 3 games in the classical time format, and in the classical time format a win is 3 points. So here we enter the rapid section. It's 15 minutes plus 2 seconds increment, so here they do have an increment, and Carlsen cannot afford to lose a game, so he has to he can draw some of the games, but he has to win games in order to get back into the match, and 9 points is just a lot to recover from. So without further ado, Magnus with the white pieces opens with knight to b3. Knight to b3 with the idea that, you could go for f4 as it immediately comes with a threat, would be a nice idea, but then black would have the same idea, for example with f5, and knight to b3 just covers a lot of the ideas. So knight to b3, probably two of the favorite moves, with f5 by Wesley, now opening up the light square bishop. If the knight moves, the pawn on a2 will be a target. With f3 by Magnus, preparing e4, and now knight to b6. With e4 by Magnus, we have trade, captures, and now e5. And knight to e3 now. We have knight to e6 by Wesley, so a bit of a symmetrical position. c3, preparing d4, and bishop to g5 now. We have bishop to c2, and now a queenside castle. Magnus does the same. We have a queenside castle, and bishop to f7 now. Preparing to get this bishop into the game via bishop to h5, as the rook on d1 is a bit, it's awkwardly placed. So king to b1 by Magnus, and now bishop to h5, attacking the rook. Rook back to c1, as Magnus made room for the rook, and now rook to f8. Getting the rook to the only open file on the board, and Magnus goes for h4, attacks the bishop, and now Wesley goes for bishop captures on e3 with bishop captures, and now knight to f4, just getting that knight into the game. Magnus still with the bishop pair, and he goes for rook to g1. It seems like he's missing knight to e2, which would come with a fork, but his idea after knight to e2 is actually bishop g5, which wins the exchange back, so it's not a problem. So here Wesley doesn't allow, also after knight e2 you could go for g4 first and then bishop to g5. So here Wesley plays the very interesting bishop to g4. He doesn't allow Magnus to push the g4 pawn, and now Magnus just decides, okay, it's time to trade with bishop captures on f4, rook captures on f4, and now g3. Pushing the rook back, rook to f6, and now d4. And okay, d6, Wesley just defends the e5 pawn, and bishop to d3 now. And here the time on the clock is 8.5 minutes Magnus, 11 minutes Wesley. We have king to b8, an important move, as you'll see later in the game. We have king to a1 by Magnus, making room for the bishop on b1, and now queen to f7, now preparing rook to f8 to have this wonderful triple battery on the f file. We have d5 by Magnus, grabbing more space here, preparing c4 to clear the b4 square for his queen. Hopefully he could go for an attack on the queen side. But now rook to f3 by Wesley. This is the idea Wesley had, why it was important to get the king away from the c8 square, because here if the king was on c8 you would have the very nice bishop to e2. So now black cannot play rook to e3 because the bishop captures bishop with check if the king was on c8. But here you can just play rook e3, and now there's a double attack on the bishop. Black is just much better here. You cannot go for this as there is no check. So after rook to f3, Magnus goes back with the bishop back to b1 instead, trying to if c4 is played and queen comes to b4, then you don't have to be afraid of any rook to f1 that may be coming with check, because the bishop is preventing that. The situation on the clock, 6.5 minutes Magnus, 8 minutes Wesley. Rook to f8, just nicely tripling on the f file, and now c4. Magnus continues with his plan, and Wesley doesn't want to meet c5 with the knight on b6, so he goes back, knight to d7, now control c5 with the knight. And queen to b4 by Magnus. We have b6 by Wesley, gaining more control over the c5 square, and here everyone thought that Magnus was going to go for c5 and go for this series of trades, knight captures, d captures, and the rook captures. The problem is black has queen to e7 here. And now you don't have a much better option than to just go back, trade queens, and play this endgame where you're just worse. Black's pawn structure is better, black's pieces are better, and well, your light square bishop is just terrible, staring at that e4 pawn. And in a match situation where you have to either win or maybe even draw to help you survive, maybe to win the next game, you don't want to play this. So Magnus decided for knight to a5. Hoping to create some attacking chances, but Wesley says that is nothing. He plays knight c5. We have knight to c6 with check, king to b7, and here Magnus doesn't like his chances. Wesley can just, Wesley's position is much better, and you don't really have a way of continuing this attack. You can't use the a4 square for your queen, you can't use the a3 square for your queen, the rook is covering that, so there's really no way for you to ever reach, for example, the a7 square, and the Wesley can just, for example, go bishop d7, pick off the knight, and then just claim he's better, which he is. So here Magnus played knight to a5 check, we have king to a8, and now knight back to c6. And here, Wesley is very content with a draw. He doesn't want to try anything weird, so he just goes back, king b7, and here Magnus says, okay, we're going to draw this. Knight a5 check, king a8, knight to c6, and it was in this position that the players agreed to a draw. So game 1 of the Rapids ends in a draw, and Magnus gets to fight another day, even though if you put this position into an engine, they will tell you that black is completely winning. For example, after bishop to d7, your idea is just to pick off the knight here. White loses the attack, and black's position is just much better. But Wesley is happy with a draw here. He says, I'm not going to push for anything. If it's you who has to push, and then if you over push, I'm going to take my chances and beat you like he did in the previous 3 games. So yeah, that's game 1. I do hope you enjoyed it. We're probably going to have game 2 up shortly. I would like to thank Usher Golf, Paul Hurst, and Joshua Selland for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, probably with game 6 of their match, or game 2 of the Rapids, if you will. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your evening.